Paola. Hola, hola.
¿Qué tal? ¿Cómo están?
All right, we're all here. We've made it. Feliz martes. Thank you all for joining us in this beautiful conversation. Poderistas, you are in for a treat. Paola and Paola are such dynamic humans and authors and just powerhouses. So I am so excited for us to start this conversation. Let's go ahead by introducing ourselves to our Poderista friends who are here joining us and who will be joining us shortly. Paola, which Paola wants to go first? I'm like, should we go by last names? How should I differentiate?
However you want.
Mendoza
Normally,
goes
Pao
first.
Ramos is Pao, and then I'm Paola. Is how it's like normally broken down when we're together.
Perfect. Okay. So, Paola, do you want to start since you were here first?
Sure, I will start. I am a mother of a beautiful 11-year-old boy, and I do a little bit of everything. I'm an author. I wrote the book Solis, as well as the first book before Solis, which was Sanctuary. I'm a filmmaker. I also organize, and all of my work is centered around immigration. Soy de Colombia, entonces inmigrante, vine desde muy chiquita. And I do a lot of work in immigration and women's spaces, and I work at the center of art and politics.
Oh, I love
which is
that.
kind of a crazy place at the moment right now.
And it's so important to have your voice in that space. So thank you for all the work that you're doing and for showing up so bravely and so, de todo corazón. Just thank you for being in that space.
Thank you.
And thank you for that introduction. Pao, would you like to go next?
Yes. First of all, thank you so much for doing this. It means a lot, and it's such a unfortunately, it's such a timely conversation. I'm talking to all of you from the hallways of 30 Rock. I actually was just seeing a screening of Jacob Sobroff's new documentary called Separated, and so unfortunately, very deep subject. Yes, my name is Paola Ramos, born in Miami to Cuban and Mexican parents. I spent the beginning of my life sort of ping-ponging between Madrid and Miami. Started my career in politics in sort of the Obama era, and very much stayed in politics through the Clinton campaign, and then sort of jumped into the world of journalism, trying to question a lot of the things that I sort of, a lot of the questions that I had inside of politics. And so in the last sort of 6, 7, 8 years, I guess at this point, I've been doing a lot of reporting with Vice, MSNBC, NBC, and focused on a lot of obviously understanding the Latino vote, the complexities of the Latino vote, spending a lot of time along the border, and also having the privilege of working alongside Paola Mendoza and learning a lot from her as well. And so I just want to thank all of you for taking the time tonight to do this. And thank you for moderating this. It means a lot.
Of course. Thank you for being here, Paola. Such an honor to be having this timely conversation about both of your books and about the larger landscape that we are beginning to navigate and will continue to navigate for the next couple of years. Amigas, once again, my name is Norma Fabian Newton. I am the founder of Fabian Flores, a firm that really focuses on amplifying Latina books and authors. Our stories now more than ever are incredibly important to the larger landscape and to our community. So it is with deep pride and pleasure that I am sitting here today moderating this conversation. Before we get any further along, let's do a check-in. I'd love to know, our communities have gone through a lot in the last couple of days. We have felt all kinds of feelings. And I think that because our community is not a monolith, it is safe to say that we are all over the place in terms of feeling and processing everything that has happened in the last week plus. Pao, I would love to start with you. How are you feeling?
I feel like I'm in sort of this, if I'm being honest, this kind of like robotic mode where I don't feel like I've had enough time. Also, does everyone hear me okay? Because I've sort of had this weird, you fear, okay, cool.
I hear a little bit of feedback. I'm not sure.
I do too. No, that's why I'm asking. Yeah.
Okay.
I don't think it's
Let's see.
from me though. But anyways, as long as everyone can hear me, great. So, yeah, so if I'm being honest, yes, I feel kind of almost numb at this point, just because I spent election nights in Phoenix in Arizona, sort of watching the results with mixed status families, and in very real time, kind of seeing the community go from, I think, a lot of optimism and sort of holding on to this idea that the United States would reject sort of Trumpism, no? And then obviously ending the night in a very different reality. And then I think now, we're all sort of spending our days and hours trying to make sense of a lot of things. And so I feel both kind of like the heaviness of where we are, and then this sort of like immense responsibility to help us all, including myself, like make sense of things. But I'm really tired. And I'm also even more tired and overwhelmed when I start to think about what comes next, no? And what that will mean for all of us, and just how careful we have to be in terms of getting that right. And by that I mean really taking care of each other, because I think it's about to be a very for lack of a better word, very, very brutal reality. Yeah.
Thank you for being so honest and for sharing that. I think a lot of people in our community feel the same way. So thank you for putting those words together, Pao. Really appreciate it. Paola, how are you feeling?
I'm not sure I'm going to be as eloquent as Pao. I feel terrible, to put it shortly. I haven't been able to do much since last Tuesday. Honestly, today was the first time that I looked at the New York Times and started to read about what was going on, because I needed just a break. I haven't been on social media. And the reason for that is because I needed time and space to just be with the grief that I felt, a profound grief. Having the hope and the possibility of Kamala Harris as our president being snatched away from us is devastating. And even more so, I think, or equally just as bad, is the reality that this country gleefully, I feel, voted for someone that has no respect, regard, care for women. And so it is such a personal attack. And I think what I have been hearing, though I haven't necessarily dived deep into the national conversation, is a real lack of gender analysis and a real lack of racial analysis of where we are. And the lack of gender analysis just yet again screams to me the desire to be blinded by the deep patriarchy and machismo that exists in this country. And I was listening to Brittany Cooper today speak on a podcast, Dr. Brittany Cooper, and she was essentially saying the same thing, that we as a country could not allow a woman, and a Black woman at that, to be in the most powerful position in the world. And I'm exhausted, I'm numb, and also angry. And I'm reflecting deeply on what is it that I need to do different, both as an artist, both as an organizer. How do I need to come into this work differently? And I have no answers. I have no answers. I have a lot of confusion and a lot of pain. I have been dreaming every night about the election in some way, shape, or form. Last night, Donald Trump was in my fucking dreams.
No.
Like, that's how terrible and deep this is right now. I pray to God that he is not there tonight. But what I will say is that to not leave us so down and dark, the glimmers of hope that I am feeling, that I have felt, have been in talking with people, have been in reaching out to my sisters across the board, have been in community. Because, as Pa was saying, like, we are entering a brutal time. And we can get into this later, but like I have imagined this world for 6 years, and I think it's in many ways going to be more brutal than my imagination. And what is one of the things that is going to save us and help us through this time is going to be our community. And we have to expand our community, even though at sometimes, and for myself also, like the desire and the instinct is actually to go insular and to be isolated and to be alone. But what we got to do is we got to reach out. We got to reach out and build strong community.
Mm-hmm. So on point, Paola. Thank you both for sharing your very personal and very, deeply held feelings, because in especially in this day and age, it's so easy. I think in the line of work that we do, it's so easy to focus on the bigger picture, focus on the policies, and to try and do some triage and try to show up. And so I think it's always so important for us to just take a minute to think about, to really talk about how are we feeling, because I think at the end of the day, it is through our ability to connect, to create community, to have meaningful conversations that we are going to build the type of world that we really want to see, one that is more just, one that is more equitable, one that is more welcoming to people of all kinds. So thank you for indulging me in that part of this conversation. Let's jump into one of the reasons why we're here today. We're here to talk about 2 amazing books that you have both authored. So for those of you Poderistas who are not aware, Pau is the author of Defectors, and Paola recently came out with Solis. Such beautiful, beautiful books that talk about identity, resistance, resilience, all of these topics that are so incredibly timely to our community right now. I want to ask, Paola, I'll start with you. What inspired you to write Solis?
To talk about that, I gotta talk a little bit about Sanctuary, and connects to the film that Pa was just watching, which I don't even think I could bear to watch that at this moment. You're much stronger than me, Pa. In 2018, family separation was implemented under the Trump administration, and I was organizing against family separation on a national level, and then I also was trying to reunite families who I had met along the way on the border by chance. And my son at the time was about 5 years old, and so many of the stories that we were hearing were about children his age. And as a mother, those stories broke me. I would get calls from mothers crying on the other end of the line saying, please help me get back to my baby. Please, 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 please. And I am a person that can get shit done. Like I always tell my son Mateo, if you want ice cream in the desert, call mama, and mama will get you ice cream in the desert anywhere in the world. I can get shit done. Like anything, I get it done. I could not, for the life of me, help these families as fast as I wanted to. And I had, I was working with a lot of people, a lot of connected people, trying desperately to reunite families, and it was impossible. And so that rage that came from that impotence, that seeing injustice, seeing children suffering, seeing the callousness of this administration, of which they obviously have said that they are going to do many things similar to that, I had to find a way to get that out for my own sake. I needed to heal from that. And so as an artist, when I am broken, I go to art, I go to creation, I go to imagination, I go to offer, right? Offer creation of some sorts. And so I started to imagine this world of Solis, of Sanctuary and Solis. It takes place in 2032. And I started to imagine if family separation wasn't stopped and it continued to fester and grow, and that cancer just continued to grow in the United States, what would the United States become? And so thus was born Sanctuary. And Sanctuary is the first book in the trilogy. It's about a 16-year-old undocumented girl that lives in 2032. And the federal government has decided to round up all of the undocumented immigrants via deportation force. Sound familiar? And California secedes from the Union and says all undocumented immigrants are welcome here. And so the lead of the book, Valley, she treks across the country with her mom, who's also undocumented, and her brother, who's documented, to try and get to California. And that's the story of Sanctuary. The story of Solis, which is the book that just recently came out, is the story of what happens after they found Sanctuary, of them realizing that their freedom and their liberation is bound to the freedom and the liberation of others. And so while Sanctuary is a story of fighting back, Sanctuary is a story about running away, Solis is a story about fighting back. Solis is how the most vulnerable in this country in 2032 fight against a federal government that is determined to annihilate them. And this story is about four people. It's told via four narrators, and they are the most vulnerable that you can imagine. The government has them in labor camps, and they're doing experiments on them, and they are dying. And yet these four characters fight back. And I think that's what I'm calling in from my heart at this moment in time, are these four characters that I spent 3 years with. Because if they were able to find the strength to resist, to fight back, to organize against a regime that was dead set on killing them and annihilating them, and they found ways of liberation and freedom and self-care and community, then it is a calling for us in this moment in time of what we are entering into the darkness to do that. It is a dark book for sure, but we are entering dark times, and in the darkness, I firmly believe it is where we find the light. It is the pathway forward. It is we who will save us. The government is not going to be able to do anything for us right now. We got to be our own leaders. We got to move forward, and we have to take care of one another, because many of us are not going to be protected, and we're going to be under attack. But I believe, I say this a million times over, and I say it in the book, together, not all of us are going to be saved, and that's the terrible reality of this moment in time. But it doesn't mean that nothing is worth saving, right? Like, we got to save what we can save, and that's where we are in this moment in time.
Thank you for sharing that. It is, I think that creativity really, really reflects our reality, and what we create can also fundamentally impact our reality. So I am so excited for our Poderistas to pick up your book and dive into it and see what they can take away from it, and see how that can really help shape the way they will be moving forward, hopefully in the next couple of days, months, weeks, years. Thank you for that, Paola. Pao, would you please tell us a little bit more about Defectors?
Yeah, so defectors, so even the title, no, to defect, essentially, obviously, to defect is the abandonment of a presumed loyalty. And so the idea of defectors is sort of to question this theory, which has always been sort of the theory of the Democratic Party and the theory of change, which was this idea that Latinos would be at the heart of the Democratic Party's sort of roadmap towards the future. And towards that theory of change, and that as we grew as a community, so too would our steps towards a sort of more, just version of the United States or of this democracy. And so I think now, particularly given everything we're seeing, I think it's kind of this play of words of if we take a step back and sort of understand who Latinos are today versus who we were 30, 40, 50 years ago, who are we supposed to be loyal to, right? What does our solidarity look like? And what do we have more in common than not today? And so essentially the book really started in 2016 as an idea, given that, being in the Clinton campaign, I saw the way that even though the story was that Latinos would sort of show up in these unprecedented numbers in the face of someone like Donald Trump, less than 50% of us actually showed up to vote in 2016. And then fast forward to 2020, you see that after 4 years of Trumpism, and after 4 years of seeing what we did, and to Paola's point, after a country that witnessed family separations in 2018, even after that, someone like Donald Trump still made anywhere between 8 to 10 points gains in 2020 compared to 2016. And so the book then really is from 2020 until now. It was based on a lot of the reporting that I was seeing that sort of pointed to this idea that there was a small but growing group of Latinos that were finding something attractive in Trumpism. And what I found in the book is that the way to explain that, the easy way to explain that, was purely through politics and through understanding the MAGA movement. But I think the harder part was to really dig into sort of the history of it all, no? Understanding the racial baggage that we carry, and understanding the weight of colonialism, and understanding the weight of political traumas, and then understanding how all of that manifests in American politics. And the answer, unfortunately, is that it's really fucking complicated, as we've seen, right? It's like, you know, I think maybe 10 years ago, it kind of all made sense, but now none of it fits into any boxes. And so that's sort of, that was the idea behind Defectors, which unfortunately has now become helped me make sense of some of the behaviors that emerged from this recent election.
Ooh. And just remind me, about your book is available currently in Spanish. Paula, is your book available in Spanish?
No, it's not available in Spanish, sadly.
Not yet.
It's available in German.
Yeah.
The Germans love it.
Well, okay. Well, for Poderistas who have families who read German, please support that version also. Thank you so much for this synopsis and for telling our Poderistas a little bit more about, you know, the work that you have been so hard at, you know, doing the last couple of years. It's so incredibly important. I really want to connect both of these books and the themes that, you know, connect them and that connect those themes to the Poderista Book Club. So this quarter, the theme has really been identity, activism, and the power of awareness. With so many complex issues, with so many layers, all we can do is to really be in community and to be aware, to have these conversations. And so it's both of these books, while I think many people would say can be difficult and can really connect us, they connect us, and they bring an awareness that is so incredibly important. If we have not been a part of the scene, if we have not been paying attention, guess what? Now's the perfect time. Mm-hmm. And these two books are exactly the type of reading that we all need to be super engrossed in, and having communities. These are the types of books that we want to be able to get for our cousins, for our nephews, for our children. You know, we want to read them together to be able to really have these dialogues, because without these conversations, Poderistas, where will we be? I don't even want to know. Mm-hmm. So let's dive in for a couple of minutes. I would love to hear a little bit more about your thoughts on the election results from a nonpartisan perspective.
Okay.
That's gonna be challenging.
Well,
so
okay,
if I get nonpartisan,
I
for
think
me. So if I get nonpartisan, Norma, you just tell me no, and I will. I'll be like,
no.
Yeah, exactly.
And what? Listen, we understand that everybody has very personal mm-hmm. views, and they are real, and they are valid, and they are welcome, because that is part of what we're here for. We are here to have a dialogue.
Yeah.
And I would love to hear a little bit more.
Do you want me to go first?
Yeah, wow, please.
Sure. No, I actually think it's not nonpartisan, right? Because it was we saw hard truth.
Yeah.
And I think I'll give you an example. I was in Phoenix the weekend before the election, and I was following a bunch of canvassers and a lot of folks that were knocking on doors, mostly from the Democratic Party. And obviously at that point, we knew objectively that the Harris campaign had a way better ground game. Their fundraising numbers were out of the roof, and their ad spending was also out of the roof. And everywhere that we called to find some Republicans that would be on the ground, because we wanted to see them canvassing like the day before the election, they were nowhere to be found. Nowhere. I mean, there were literally, it was almost impossible to get sort of B-roll and footage of Republicans going door knocking. Mm-hmm. And I think that speaks to sort of the advantage that the Trump campaign had, which was a resounding, powerful message that integrated fear, anger, resentment, and disgust. And I think we all assumed that in the face of a Trump campaign that was purely motivated and driven by this very visceral anti-immigrant sentiment, also added layers of transphobia. We all believed, right, that so many Latinos would sort of reject that idea. And I think what ended up happening is that, yes, right, the first story is that the Harris campaign did win the majority of the Latino vote. Like, that is the story. But it is also true that the Trump campaign made huge inroads. And I believe that it's not enough to sort of dissect it through an economic argument, which I think a lot of people are trying to do that. I think that he really was able to tap into very deep racial and ethnic grievances. He was able to really galvanize a form of traditionalism that I think is very heavy within us, that really resonated with the Trump campaign's culture war language, particularly the transphobia. And I also think they were able to tap into this very complicated relationship that many people have with authoritarianism and strongman rule. And I think all of that put together, added in with the mis and disinformation, added in with the real disillusionment that a lot of people were feeling, added in with the mistrust, knowing the system, ended up exposing an ugly part of us, which is that there are a significant number of Latinos that see themselves in Trumpism. And we can talk about it all day long, but I also think we need to sit with that truth. And it doesn't mean that that they are gone or that they're bad people. It means that we have to understand the root causes of that sort of road towards Trumpism. No, it's very easy to cast everyone as these radical Latino Trump supporters, which everyone can sort of do it. But I think the hard part is to understand where in that pathway in politics, where did they find something so alluring in Trumpism? And that's sort of the work that I'm trying to do.
And
Thank you for that work. So
I
important.
and I would add to the great breakdown, very clear analysis that Paola just gave us. But I think what's really, in addition to that, is, and she mentioned it a little bit, is this idea of machismo. It's also the gender analysis. Yes, there is a self-hatred in Latinos with regards to Afro descendants and indigenous descendancies, and there is a desire, if you know, I come from Latin America, I grew up in Latin America, we all know the desire to quote unquote be Spanish, to be closer to our Spanish roots, right? And so that is a very real and not surprising experience if you are Latino from Latin America, and also here in the United States, it shows up in different ways.
Right.
But I think also the attraction and the desire of machismo, of a strong man, of very traditional gender roles. So transphobia is absolutely pushed front and center in with Donald Trump's campaign, and the undergirdle of that is we will uphold gender norms, right? We believe in the binary so fully that we want it to stay. A woman is a woman's job, and a man's job is a man's job, and those are the two pillars that uphold the racism within the desired party, as well as this need to be in this very gendered space. And so I think that is something that is extraordinarily deep and hard to break apart in the Latino community. I mean, in the United States also, but like within the Latino community, there is a deep-rooted acceptance of that those gender roles. And so I also think that it's very, very important for us as a Latino community to have a real conversation of this problem. It is a problem. We can't say, yes, the majority of Latinos did vote for Harris, great, but that number is dwindling. And us ignoring it or trying to spin it in a different way is not helpful. It's not just gonna go away. What Paola has shown us in her book is actually that those numbers are growing and growing and growing and growing. And so ignoring it or spinning it is not helpful. And so what we really need to do is have those conversations conversations. I see everyone in here in this chat is moving so fast that we need to reach across the aisle. We need to talk to people. We need to talk to people that are not like us. I mean, my tios and my tias, many of them are Republicans. I think 2 of them voted for Donald Trump. Like, that is within our community. It's very normal, I think, within the Latino community to have that. So we can start there. And then we also need to go beyond that. We need to, and it's hard for me. Like, when I think about like sitting down to talk with a Trump supporter, like it is challenging for me. There is no doubt. I'm not going to sit here and be like, yeah, I'm so down to do it. It is really hard because it feels very personal to me. It feels like a personal affront, a personal attack. And yet I do think that is the way that we have to move forward in that way.
I completely agree. And I want to say, before I go on too far, I want to say I really, really appreciate both of the breakdowns that you have given to what has happened and what will continue to happen and really where we need to focus. So I think for our Poderistas, I think it's so important that we understand that these 2 books really do help us understand the complex power dynamics. There are some systems, and there are not just systems, cultures, tendencies that we have both as Latinos, as Americans, as Latin Americans, that all converge and create just enormous complexities. And just in hearing you both talk, I am both comforted and reminded of just how difficult it can be to really have these conversations and to think about these issues. I'm comforted because sometimes I'm like, what happened? How did this happen? And in hearing both of you talk about this tonight, I think that we are giving this entire community a deeper perspective, and we're helping to really break apart some of those layers. And I think that your books will absolutely do this. And it is by understanding power dynamics. It is by understanding these systems and what has come together that we can really make societal change. I also want to, I know that this is a heavy conversation, and I want to remind everybody that it is so important to stay engaged, regardless of what we're seeing now and what is to come. The only way we are going to really make systemic and deep, true, long-lasting change is by continuing to stay involved. And that, in part, it depends on our ability to be aware. It's the power of awareness. By uncovering hidden truths, by staying informed, by recognizing political dynamics and the roles in which those play, and the way that those roles are going to play out in our interpersonal, in our community relationships, it's critical to be informed. And I think that is one of the reasons why these 2 books just make so much sense right now and are so important. So Poderistas, if you haven't yet picked up these books, do yourself a favor. Don't try to understand this moment alone. You're gonna need support, and that support can come in the form of these 2 beautiful books. So important. Let's talk a little bit about how our community can prepare for what's ahead. I feel like we're almost at time, and I feel like we could just sit here and talk for many more hours and really try to get to the heart of this. And I want to make sure that our Poderistas understand that Latinos, Latinas, Latine, we showed up, and we showed up in powerful ways. And we showed up in very different ways. So I think it's so important that we acknowledge our strength and that we encourage and continue to be aware and to be engaged. But I would love to hear, Paola, what do you think is next? Like, how can we prepare for what's coming?
I'm reading here in the chat, and there's a lot of fear. There's a lot of people talking about anxiety. There's just a lot of fear for family members, for their own bodies, for their marriage, because they're queer. And I think that fear is obviously valid. And we know that Trump got into power by using that fear. in other ways, twisting fear. And so I think the first and most important thing is information, real information, making sure that the information that we're reading about what is happening and what is going down is real. We know in our WhatsApp is the wild, wild west out there. Misinformation is out there like crazy. We get it from our tias, forwarded from 20,000 people. Who knows where it's coming from? So like that's, I think really, it seems very obvious, but it's so important. Make sure that the information that you are getting about what is possibly happening, what laws are being implemented, is real information. We do not want to scare our communities with things that might not be real but sound very, very scary, right? So whether it's false raids, whether it's false laws that are being implemented, whether it's, you know, mass deportations, all of those things, like we got to be very specific. And then also we got to be local. We got to organize from a local perspective. We got to work locally. There are lots of things going out there about like marches this, marches that. I'm a co-founder of the First Women's March, and that was a moment in time that was very specific and it had its own criticisms. I personally do not think that the strategy moving forward in this moment in time is to do national marches. It is something that we have been doing for years and years and years, and we have failed, all of us collectively. On my side, we have failed, right? And so we need to change our strategy. So I say, let's not think so nationally and go to a national march, but rather let's use our money, use our dollars, use our power, use our bodies on a local level. So what is your local organization that is helping the communities that you are a part of and that you care about? I think that's something that's really important. And also because part of authoritarianism is to create so much fear that in many ways we obey in advance the things that we want them to do, that they want us to do, right? So we need to not obey in advance, and we need to check our fear, and we need to do that by finding organizations, being in community, being educated, and getting out there how we need to get out there. Like we got to think outside the box. Like that's what my brain is. I'm like, how can we do things differently? How do we organize differently? How do we tell stories differently? How do we get information out there differently? Because for a long time we've been out strategized, and we gotta figure out another way.
Such important information. Poderistas, now is the time to be in community. Now is the time to have those conversations. I'm curious, Paola, do you have any recommendations of websites or sources of information that people can go to where they can find real information? Because you're right, the proliferation of false news is just wild.
There's organizations that I love from an immigration perspective that I adore, and they are both national and local. Make the Road is a great organization. Obviously, United We Dream for DACA recipients. They are upfront with real information specifically about DACA recipients. They are also organizing nonstop. And then there's smaller organizations in various states. There's Al Otro Lado in California that works specifically with migrants. There's Las Americas in Texas, in El Paso, that also works specifically with migrants. So it's finding those small local organizations and voices in the people that you trust. Paola obviously is always giving us really important information that is vetted and truthful from an immigration standpoint. And then, you know, I think from a repro standpoint, there's this new website called We All Have Options, I think, and that is just also a gatherer of information about abortion pills and laws and raising money and abortion funds. So what is going to happen, I think, is how we survive in the next 2-4 years is we are working mutual aid, small, local, helping our communities, getting really local in how we organize and how we activate amongst the various issues in our communities.
Beautiful. Thank you so much, Paola. Poderistas, local, Poderistas, you can do this. I think that one other thing that you touched upon, Paola, is creativity, thinking outside the box, and realizing that our little granito de arena is going to make an impact collectively. So do it. Save your money. Start local. Do it. Pao, por favor, please. How can we prepare? What's coming?
I honestly think, Paola, laid it out perfectly. I don't have much more to add, because I think she's right. I think that the key is really to understand that no one knows how to protect their communities better than the local groups. No, no one. And so I think as people are thinking about whether it's mass deportations or helping out the queer community or asylum seekers along the border, in many ways, people have been preparing for this moment for years. You know? There is an infrastructure in place. And so as we've said, things may feel extremely overwhelming right now, but there's very small things we can do, whether it's supporting a lawyer, whether it's giving $5 to your local group, whether it's simply volunteering, but to everyone's point, think local. And then of course the mis and disinformation, I think that's one of the stories of this election. You know, it's this idea that we're literally living in two realities. Right. There was one reality, and it was very evident in the way that everyone kind of was voting with democracy in their head on Tuesday, but everyone had very different ideas of what democracy meant, because we were all literally living in different media worlds. And so let's try as much as we can, because to Paola's point also, one of the first things that tend to happen in sort of when governments are morphing into autocracies or forms of authoritarianism, we don't know what's going to happen, but one of the first things they do is that they control the narrative, you know, particularly when you have people like Elon Musk that are about to enter. And so we have to start thinking about showing people realities. No, going back to Paola's work in 2018, how are we going to show what's happening so that people are once again morally outraged by things? No, and so again, thinking about that, and then lastly, yes, the importance of one, understanding that people need to go through their feelings right now, but I think one of the things that they're counting on is that fear will suppress, right? That to not have enough imagination to sort of push a party in the direction that needs to be pushed, right? I think there's a lot of conversations happening right now around these two ideas. Now, does the Democratic Party or does the movement need to be more moderate? No, or does the movement need to be courageous enough to give people something else? And so I think I would just encourage people to not lose sight of their imagination. Huh? We don't know the answer, but it's never good to reduce that imagination. So that's it.
I think that's so important, Bo. Thank you for sharing that with us. I'm curious, before, I would love, one of the things that when I hear you speak, I love it. Both of you. And Bao, in particular, I'm wondering if you can tell our Poderistas a little bit more about how we showed up. How did the community show up in this election from your research and from what you've been seeing?
I mean, so much. Like, I think the unfortunately, so much of the narrative right now is very dark. But I think it was, look, I'll give you a very brief example. On election night, as it was very evident that Donald Trump was going to become the president, and as it was very evident in this room that it was full of mixed status families, many undocumented folks, what the organizers in the room did was that they started dancing. And I know Paola will appreciate this, because you very much sort of exemplify this idea, no, that people started dancing and singing and really tried to find joy in the middle of that darkness. And I think that is just an example of how ready people are, you know, because they know that not only can they do it, but that they have no other option but to fight for people. And I think that's just a manifestation of a lot of the small groundwork that all of us have been doing in very small ways, that we are at a point where things are so grim and so scary, but the willingness to surpass that, as scary as it is there, no? And I think that speaks to the work that Poderistas has been doing for a long time, which is just the confidence to know that no matter to Paola's point, no matter how dark it is, like, there's some form of light, and I think that's courageous. Yeah.
So beautiful, and such a wonderful reminder that even in these dark times and the times that are yet to come, our joy is so revolutionary. Our joy, our creativity, that is what is going to produce some of the light. And that's what's going to ultimately, I really believe, is going to save us. Because when we lose hope, when we lose joy, when we lose our creativity, that's when I think that as a community, we become extremely, extremely vulnerable. I know that a lot has been said about how we've showed up, how we didn't show up, what we did. And I think that one of the things that we can really take away from today and from this conversation is that we cannot lose sight of the importance of being in community, of experiencing joy, of understanding who we are as a community and rising to that occasion.
Mm-hmm.
And I think both of you have really spoken so beautifully about all of these layers of activism and identity and resilience and joy and creativity and empathy. And I just want to thank you for showing up.
Sorry, I'm just
Thank you so
laughing
much.
because someone put in the in the comments, look at your abuelita's chancleta. That's so good. For sure.
So
Paola,
good,
¿qué vas a
so good.
decir?
I just want to leave us with a question, and it's a question that I often ask myself in all times and all moments. And I think like moving into the next 4 years, it's definitely a question that will be center for me. And that is, what am I willing to do for the liberation of someone else?
Mm.
And that is how we have to move forward here. That's how we save each other. That's how we find our path, and that's how we survive.
That's how we save ourselves.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Pao, any last words? Any last final
I'm
thoughts?
not gonna even attempt to beat what Paola just did. Absolutely not. No, I'm taking that in.
Qué placer, Poderistas. There are still so many of you who are in this live. Thank you for being here.
Yeah.
Thank you for showing up for your community. If you have not yet picked up Defectors, Solis, please do so. This is the time. Pick one up for you, for your neighbor, for your abuelita, for for everyone in your community. We need our stories. We need these books now more than ever. This is part of making sure that our community is taken care of, that our community has the information that it needs. This is heavy. This is heavy, I'm not gonna lie. Like I feel my chest is a little tight, and I'm just gonna be real, because that's sort of the only way I know how to be. But this conversation has given me a lot of joy, a lot of hope, and I'd be lying if I said I wasn't scared.
Yeah.
I know that our future is going to be one that requires us to step up and to be in conversation and to educate ourselves. And I am excited to do it with all of you. If you haven't yet, Poderistas, if you haven't yet joined the Poder Circle Book Club, please do so. If you want more, there will be questions available. So reading guides for both of these books. There is so much great information available. I hope that you will join us. And Paola, Pao, thank you for being here. It has been an honor and a privilege to be able to be in conversation with you, to hear everything that you have to share. I look forward to being in community, and I look forward to working together again. Gracias.
Definitely.
Thank you so
Gracias.
much.
Buenas noches.
Thank you, everybody. Have a good night.
Buenas
Hasta
noches.
luego.
Good night.
Bye.
Buenas noches.